Welcome! I'm here today with Judith Speight, who is another award winner here in Auckland for the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day. And Judith is a lady who I've long admired for her work in digital literacy, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but I'm going to let her tell you about digital literacy and why what she's doing is so important, not only to the people down here in New Zealand, but to the rest of the world. So welcome, Judith.
Thank you, Roberta. We've just been having a bit of a chat about what the interview's about and what the opportunity is here. And Roberta's comment was that this is the opportunity to sing. So to sing about accelerating Aotearoa, my passion, and what has become my life, but not only my life, my family's life, really. Accelerating Aotearoa is about New Zealanders and increasingly the region understanding that digital literacy is in fact the key to health and well-being. That without being digitally literate, you are in fact unable to have a skilled job, and if you don't have a skilled job, well, as we say, you're toast. Really, skilled work is so important to the health and well-being of entire economies. So we say accelerating Aotearoa does three things. We deliver hope, we deliver dreams, and we deliver possibility through digital literacy. We deliver a link between education and well-being, understanding why you'd want an education and why that will impact on your well-being. Secondly, that notion of how do you support a family, or how do you support young kids, in fact, to get the education they need, and how do you support them into skilled work? Well, actually it takes a whole family, and it takes a community, and it takes a whole lot of people that want to achieve that well-being for those kids. You can't just pluck a child and pop it into a career path. It doesn't happen like that. Family, communities. And then the last thing is that idea of working together. So on my Facebook, on my LinkedIn page, in fact, it's, you, as you will know, I'm sure, invited to give yourself a title. Well, my title is collaborator. So I'm the glue between lots of different people trying to do the same thing.
Out of curiosity, why digital literacy? I mean, literacy is a huge problem. Literacy and numeracy is a problem in many, many countries. You've taken and you've concentrated on digital literacy. Why digital as opposed to just literacy as a whole?
Because we believe that digital literacy is in fact the cornerstone of the knowledge economy. All very well to read a book, but if you can't send an email, if you can't check a website, if you can't research the information you need, you can't succeed. We've looked at some stats, even something as basic as trying to get a job. 80% of jobs in 2011 are in fact advertised digitally. They're not on the newspaper anymore, they're actually on the net.
So everybody with their cell phones, aren't they digitally aware now?
Absolutely. The skills to use a cell phone are digital skills.
So it becomes a very important part of a lot of people's lives. Now, you concentrated, or you mentioned very much on children. Why? What are you doing particularly to encourage children and to get them digitally literate?
Most of our work at the moment, the work that we're doing domestically is in that youth transition area. We're working across a number of areas, particularly with underserved communities, to encourage families, communities to work and support their young people into tertiary education and skilled work. So we've got a program we've called Accelerating Pacific Careers. We launched it last year in South Auckland. It aimed to, we selected 100 kids, Pacific kids, from across Auckland, north, south, east, west. And their schools were identified them. We said we don't want the head boy and the head girl, we want the kids that with a nudge would come on a journey with us. And so we had 14 different schools involved, 100 kids, about 40 or 50 family community members turned up to support them on the day. And we said, actually kids, this is a 3-phase project. Number one, you need to sign up to be part of it, a long-term project. You need to register. We want to know mum and dad's phone number. We want to know mum and dad's email address. We want to know your email address. We want to know what inspires you, what thrills you, where you want to go. We want to know a whole lot of stuff about you. Now, as far as we understand, that's the first time Pacific youth have actually been asked those questions. There's all sorts of research that's been done on youth, all sorts of research that's been done on youth aspiration, but there's been nothing that's focused on Pacific kids. It seems crazy to me, really crazy. Anyway, so sign up. Turn up was number 2. You had to turn up to our launch day, show your face, here I am, I'm prepared to be involved. And then there was the follow-up section, so to have that relationship over a long period of time, to work together so that we can choose the right career, get the right education for that career, and then help them into jobs. So that's one project. We've been working with Matato, the Maori Business Network, to launch this year Auckland Maori Careers, accelerating Maori careers, of course not Auckland because we're nationwide. We had been working in Canterbury, in the Canterbury region, to do an accelerating Pacific careers in Canterbury, and that was before the earthquake, and we're feeling very tragic about the people we'd grown to care for, and we've been working with to try and make that happen. In due course we'll understand whether we'll be able to do that this year, but it may in fact be delayed.
You said with your first project that they had to have an email address. How many kids nowadays do you know of that still don't have emails? Because I know there are, and I mean it sounds incredible, and for a lot of our listeners it would be a little difficult to understand. We have an area of the city called North Shore, and we have an area of the city called South Auckland. They are about 40 kilometres apart, so they're actually a good distance. Now North Shore is kind of considered an affluent area, and South Auckland is often considered not so affluent. They did a study on the North Shore, and I think it was about 20% of people didn't have email addresses, didn't have any presence on the web on the North Shore. Makes me wonder what's happening in South Auckland. So did your kids, when they showed up, actually have an email address, or was that something you had to set them up with?
Of the hunt, firstly they had to register before they came. That was how we knew they were coming. 69 of the 100 had email addresses, yes.
Okay.
So 70%.
Yeah.
I think more of them did. So, 69 registered ahead of time.
Okay.
So I think the prevalence of, an email address is free.
Gmail or Hotmail or whatever, yeah.
Yahoo. You don't need a computer even to have an email address. You can rock down to the local library in New Zealand where internet access is free in the local library. So I think, whether or not, some people may in fact texting, we know, particularly with Maori and Pacific careers, that the uptake on technology is higher in fact than for other ethnic origins.
Okay.
So there's a predisposition to use technology and a love for technology and an understanding of technology, which is in fact quite exciting when you start thinking about the jobs of the future.
Absolutely, especially some of them have some great bents in the arts, and so much nowadays is being done with computers and some of the software that's out there. So it's not just, what we see on TV in movies like Avatar and some of the others, it's all computer generated, but it's all people who've got a passion for technology,
creativity, or technology enabled creativity, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. So those are your two projects that you're working with right now?
Beyond that, we have a website where kids talk about their jobs, because that was one of the things that we found working in schools, was that kids had no idea what the technology careers were or what a digital career meant. And so we've said, a digital career is anything from being a receptionist, on the assumption that you're using digital tools, to being perhaps a nanotechnician, and what are all the jobs in between. We worked with a number of tertiaries, but particularly the University of Auckland and University of Otago, to identify the digital jobs, and then we recruited gorgeous young people to talk about what their jobs were, how much they got paid, what they studied, what their job felt like each day. And the whole idea was, in fact, to create that understanding about the digital jobs of the future. Of course, since this is an opportunity to sing, you'd find that that website at www.digitalcareers.co.nz. We are working with Careers New Zealand, the new career services organisation, to take that out to schools throughout New Zealand. We are still hoping to recruit further tertiaries to support the website that has been paid for by tertiaries to date, and the tertiary organisations that have supported us, I think, have been NatCol, University of Auckland, University of Otago, Open Polytechnic, New Zealand School of Education, and one other, which I'll be hung for because I can't remember its name. Never mind, they've been wonderful, they've worked with us. The whole thing was created by interns, so we know that, you know, we've the content and at the technical level, interns have created it, so we know that it's exciting, we know it appeals to kids, we know that it's, yeah, so we're very excited about it coming together. And we've got 25 different kids talking about their jobs.
That's fantastic. And you can access through mobile, so that's not a major problem, because that's how a lot of kids will be accessing is through mobile. How did you get involved with this? Why did you start doing this in the first place?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure we've ever had that conversation before. I came, well, I talk about being a corporate refugee. I worked for 20 years in corporate roles, increasingly in international corporate roles, and found that I was being run ragged by corporations themselves, as many of us do. Run ragged by the politics, run ragged by the travel. No, it was away. We used to do, day trips to Melbourne and Sydney and overnights into Singapore or Hong Kong. It was just crazy. And I wasn't achieving anything. And I felt, it was a big price to pay for a paycheck once a month. And increasingly I realised that was irrelevant. So I really wanted to make a difference. I was fortunate that about the time I was having this epiphany, I was chairman of TUANZ, the Telecommunications Users Association of New Zealand, and there was an opportunity there to run some awareness campaigns, so that on someone else's checkbook I was able to create, in fact, a broadband awareness campaign for New Zealand, which was very exciting, and I realised that this is what making a difference felt like, and I thought, I need to do that. Fortunately, my husband had a job, so we didn't both need one, and I was able to establish our organisation, got some funding from the Tertiary Education Commission to kick us off, and the rest, I guess, is history.
In terms of what's happening in the rest of the world, how's what you're doing and the work you're doing with digital literacy, how's that working in the rest of the world? Are there countries that are ahead of us? Are there countries that are behind us? Are there countries you're working with? Because I know you've done an awful lot of gone and speaking in the United States and Asia and whatnot on what you're doing. So obviously there are other countries looking at it, but how do we stand? How
do we stand with... Could I twist that question perhaps and talk about the collaboration place?
Yep, go.
I had the opportunity at the end of last year to go as a representative of New Zealand up to Japan. In fact, there was the well-intentioned and kind, generous government of the United States that funded that trip. They had brought together, under the auspices of APEC, women from all of the APEC nations, and it was the beginning of a project called the Women's Entrepreneurial Summit. The vision, and of course the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's vision, and I know she's very passionate about it, was that if we had enough women working together across the APEC nations, that we could in fact enable whole communities, whole people. Why women? My dad always says, now what the hell are you doing working on a sexist project? Women because we can trust them, women because we feed our children, women because we build our communities. Not saying that men don't, but women are driven to enable more powerfully.
Yep.
So as a result of the Women's Entrepreneurial Summit, we were challenged to come up with some projects that might enable women in Pacific nations, or across the Pacific nations. From that, the work that we've been doing in New Zealand is working, and we thought we'd just bring it down to a smaller, something that was bite-sized, something we could all get our heads around, something that we could work, understand that nature of collaboration effectively. And we've said, well, let's do a project around Tonga. And why Tonga? Because Tonga's on the brink of bankruptcy, because Tonga has a brand new hope. It has democracy, it has a brand new Prime Minister, it has a brand new government. And Tonga because I've been fortunate to meet some of the leaders that are growing the new Tonga. We said, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could empower Tongan people through supporting them to rekindle historical connections with agriculture. What about if we could bring up the exports of Tonga so that they could grow their own economic independence? What about if we could just tip the scales a bit so that the Tongan government, or the Tongan nation, the Kingdom of Tonga, didn't go down the tubes? Huge opportunity, wonderful vision. We've been talking to a number of different organisations, and of course the US Embassy here, about what that project might look like. One thing in particular is that the Tongan nation, as with many other economies across the Pacific, are very heavily dependent on remittance money. We're talking about $200 million a year go into the Tongan economy out of the pockets of their families living offshore. In Samoa, that number's 400 million. It's a lot of money, and it creates dependence. It's effectively a private welfare scheme. So the kind of things we've been talking to organisations such as Kiwi Bank in New Zealand is, what about if you didn't actually send that money over, that you actually worked with communities, with families in New Zealand that are sending that money overseas, worked with them to create trusts. A trust that might buy machinery, a trust that could buy plants, a trust that would, as a family, build capability, independence, sustainability, instead of the family back in Tonga spending it on pisupo, tinned woolly beef that's going to make them fat and give them type B diabetes, or condensed milk. Because what happens, of course, is that the money goes overseas and families spend the money on food from New Zealand. Huge inequality, no opportunity for sustainability. So we've got many women from the other 23 APEC economies that are working right now on projects of that nature to support our sisters in the Pacific. Very exciting, very powerful, very visionary.
Sounds exciting. We're both basically out of time. Anything you kind of want to say to the women out there about what they can do to kind of help promote any of the passions that you have? This is about, we've come so far in 100 years, but we got a long way to go, I think.
The work of Accelerating Aotearoa is intensely personal. It gives the people that work with us huge satisfaction. Many of them, our meetings, when we get here, the project meetings are often opened with, I'll be looking forward to this meeting all week. It's so much more real in my job. It's just what I want to do all the time. And I know I used to feel like that too. So I can offer any woman, even men, wonderful opportunities to be involved in meaningful things if you come and work with us. So that's for if you're an individual. If you're a corporation, we desperately need money to do the things we need to do. We can do a lot with nothing. And we do certainly run on the oil of the smell of an oily rag. But if you have a checkbook, we desperately need checkbooks too. That is how we will grow our communities. This is how we will grow families, will grow talent for the future, both in New Zealand and in the Pacific. So go to our website. You can contact me on the Digital Careers website or on the Accelerating Aotearoa website, acceleratingaotearoa.co.nz. I answer every single contact personally within 24 hours. So love to hear from you. Come and work with us. Have a look on the website at the work we're doing. Enjoy the opportunity of being able to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.